Americans are funny about money. When it comes to personal finance, we can buy magazines. We can look in just about any daily newspaper in America, and there is a money or a finance section. We are concerned about how much money people make and how much money people are worth. Economic news very much fills the headlines and lead stories. And even though we are the richest nation on earth, we are concerned about economic downturns and trends and what will happen in the future. In this presidential election year of 2008, the candidates are regularly being told that economic issues are far more important to the voters than foreign policy or national security or health care or good government or anything else. So we talk a lot about money, and so did Jesus. It may come as a surprise that when you analyze all of the topics of Jesus, that one of the top topics was money. But before we get to today's hard saying of Jesus from Matthew 6:24, I want to invite you to a test that was part of a survey that became a cover story for Time magazine. There were 770 self-defined Christians in America who stated whether they disagreed or agreed with the statements that I'm going to read to you. Now, don't say your answer, but just pretend that you are talking to the Time researcher on the telephone, and you've got to say personally whether you agree or disagree. And then I'll tell you what everybody else had to say. So there are two categories. First category is obtaining wealth. Here's the statement. God wants people to be financially prosperous. So imagine how you would answer. Agree or disagree? 61% of American Christians say they agree. 26% disagree. Next statement. Material wealth is a sign of God's blessing. 21% agree. 73% disagree. Poverty can be a blessing from God. This one was fairly close. 45% agree, 49% disagree. Jesus was not rich, and we should follow his example. 48% agree, 44% disagree. Second category has to do with giving it away. If you give away your money to God, he will bless you with more money. 31% agree, 63% disagree. Christians in the U.S. don't do enough for the poor. Again, fairly close. 49% agree, 43% disagree. Last one. Giving away 10% of your income is the minimum God expects. And your answer is, well, among American Christians, 39% agree and 57% disagree. All right, as far as what I think about these statements, I'm not going to tell you what I think about any of these statements or what I would have said. So it's just to kind of get us thinking about a topic that was frequently on the lips of Jesus. So here's what Jesus said in Matthew 6:24. No one can serve two masters. Either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. Now, doesn't that sound a little extreme? Can't you have both God and the big bucks at the same time? Well, let's look at what Jesus was saying. To start out with, Jesus was comprehensive. He says, no one can serve two masters. So it's an exclusive statement. There are some things for which there are no exceptions, like you cannot survive a fatal heart attack. You just can't. No one ever does. And you can't fly from Minneapolis to Manila in under an hour. Nobody can do that. And you can't definitively get to the last number of pi. You can spend your lifetime extending the numbers out. You are never, ever actually going to get there. And in that category of no exceptions is what Jesus says. No one can serve two masters. Understand that Jesus was living in the Roman Empire, and he uses the terminology of slavery, which was common, and it was the law in those days, the terminology of master and of servant or slave. In those days, if an owner had a slave, the owner truly owned that slave. Some masters were kind and gracious. They paid money. They set slaves free. There were slaves that rose to surprisingly prominent positions in the Roman Empire. But at the other side, if an owner wanted to beat a slave, there was no legal recourse, or kick a slave out when the slave got too old and was eating too much money. There was no necessity to pay a slave. A slave could be forced to work 24 hours a day. There were no vacations. And an owner could kill a slave. And there was nothing breaking the law in doing that. And in those days, there was only one owner. There were no timeshares for slaves. It was one owner for each slave. So it was a 100% deal. We, of course, gratefully, live in a nation where there is no legalized slavery. So maybe we need to think of it in more modern American terms. Michael Jordan is one of the superstar athletes of this generation. He tells an interesting story in a book he wrote entitled Driven from Within. He tells about going to the home of Fred Whitfield, who at the time was the chief operating officer and the president of the NBA's Charlotte Hornets. And at Whitfield's home, they decided that they would go out for dinner together. And Jordan asked if he could borrow a jacket from Whitfield to go out to eat. So he went to Whitfield's closet and opened the closet, and there was a choice of jackets. Some had on them the logo for Nike, and at least one other had the logo for Puma. Michael Jordan took the Puma jacket into Whitfield's living room and laid it out on the floor, then went into the kitchen and got a butcher knife. And he came back and he cut the Puma jacket to shreds. Then he picked up the shreds, went outside and threw them away in the dumpster. Came back in and said to Fred Whitfield, "Don't you ever let me see you in anything other than Nike. You can't ride the fence." Now, in case you don't know, Michael Jordan has an exclusive contract with Nike. So what would this sound like? Try this. No one can serve two brands. Either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both Nike and Puma. What he was saying was essentially the same as what Jesus was saying. The difference is that Jesus was talking about matters of far, far greater importance than brands of athletic gear. Jesus was talking about competing gods. Gods competing for leadership in our lives. Another way of considering what Jesus said is to look at one of the quintessential definitions of sin in the New Testament, and that is in the first chapter of Romans. In Romans 1:25, where concerning sinners it is said that they exchanged the truth of God for a lie and worshiped and served created things rather than the Creator, who is forever praised. So there you've got a definition of sin. Sin is worshiping and serving the creature, the creation, rather than the Creator. And Jesus was posing the competition between money as a creation and God as the Creator, and saying to misworship or misserve is centrally sin. The Great Commandment appears in both the Old Testament and the New Testament. It's the choice that Jesus is here positioning. In Deuteronomy 6:5, the ancient Jews were told to love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength. Jesus quoted that not quite exactly, but pretty close, in Matthew 27:37, when he said, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment." So the core teaching, the great commandment of the Old and the New Testament is that God is God. He is the creator of the heavens and the earth. Before him was nothing. There is nothing that exists that does not belong to him. That this is a reality. It is the truth. And that we should reflect that reality and reflect that truth in the commitment that we have to God and in the devotion of our hearts and lives. That God is the master, that God is the owner, that God is the boss, and that as Christians, we should strive for nothing less, and we should believe nothing different. Now, I believe that. I believe that absolutely, that God is God, that he is Lord, that he is master, that he is owner. But money has this magnetism to it that somehow escapes words. Money has this appeal, all of its own. And to be really transparent, we've got to say that we kind of love what it can do. And we love what money can buy. So, on the one hand, as followers of Jesus, we say, God, you are first, absolutely. But on the other hand, we struggle with the dominance that money can easily take within our lives for, I suppose, a lot of reasons. One of them is greed, because there's something about money that is addictive, that no matter how much we have, we would prefer to have more. It raises a very old question of what is rich and how you would define rich. If I can ask you to privately answer yet another survey question, what would you pick as a number? How much money is rich? And you would, in this case, be answering a survey that was published in the newspaper USA Today. It was a survey of all Americans, and the criterion was $50,000 a year in income or more. So those making $50,000 and up were asked, how much money do you have to be rich? Some said $100,000 would make you rich. But that's only 2% of Americans think that. And some said $250,000. Well, that was only 4% think you're rich at $250,000. How about $500,000? It ekes up a little bit. 7% of those making $50,000 and up think that you would be rich if you had $500,000. There's a significant jump when you're defined as a millionaire. 30% of Americans making this amount of money say that a millionaire makes you a rich person. And then some say 3 million, that's 28%. Others say you need at least 5 million or more, which is another 28%. So we have this sliding notion of what is wealth and what is being rich. And I suppose it's rooted in greed, not in the most cruel and awful descriptions of greed, just the reality that we would like to have more. And it's not just the cash, it's the accumulation of things. If you don't think you have much, let me suggest to you that you move tomorrow. And think if you can get everything packed up and out of your place and just ready to go by the time the movers come at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. In America, we have significantly increased in this generation the size of our houses. In 1973, the average home in America was 1,660 square feet. By the beginning of this decade, the average home in America was 2,400 square feet. So we have a lot more stuff and a lot bigger houses to keep the stuff in. But 1 in every 11 American homeowners has a storage garage off-site. So that means that we have so much stuff that our stuff has a home of its own. And we then go visit it 3 times a year, sort of like a distant relative that we just show up and see how it's doing. The British writer John Stott, I think provocatively, said that we need to give away what we are not using because if we don't use it, we don't need it. Let me try that one more time. We need to give away what we are not using because if we don't use it, we don't need it. There's just something about money that is so very attractive even as a competing god. Or perhaps it's because of pride that money is a competing god. I think that money pumps up our pride. That if we have more, we somehow assume that we are smarter, we would never say this, but better than those that have less. In our heads and sometimes with our mouths we say, you know, if they were more responsible, if they would be as I am, they would have as much as I have. We even have this expression in our culture of defining someone's net worth. It, of course, refers to money, but it's kind of also saying what I am worth as a person because of the money that I have. And there's something about money that just makes us feel good. So call it greed, call it pride, but there's another aspect, at least I think, and that is fear. What if we had less money? Or what if we lost what we have? What would then happen to us? And you know, again, if you are following what is happening in the news in the world's economy, and specifically in America's economy, that there are a lot of people that are running scared. The unemployment rate is rising. There have been epidemic foreclosures of single-family residences across America. And there are a lot of people that are just plain worried. They're worried that they're going to lose their jobs. They're worried that they might be included in the foreclosure, even though to date they have been up to date on the paying of payments. Or there are those who are thinking about retirement or investment or saving for some project, and the value of the equity funds that they are in has been reduced, and there's worry about this. There's worry about what if everything went wrong? Because things have gone wrong at other times, including the Great Depression in America's economy. What if I reach the age of Social Security and the money's not there? What if the government no longer provides Medicare? What if things go wrong? And they can go wrong, and we're frightened by that. One of the wealthiest men I have ever known in my life lost everything in his late 70s. He had inherited wealth, he was a successful businessman, and he got involved in a combination of investments, and he just lost it all. Lived out the rest of his life with his only income being Social Security. He would be, at least in the people that I know, the last person you would ever expect that to happen to. So the fear of those things going wrong can make money more important in our lives. And it's all of this that is woven into this hard saying of Jesus. But maybe another part of it, which as Christians, I at least am very reluctant to admit, is a lack of faith. What if what it's really about is that I come up short in terms of my faith in God? Now, truthfully, if you lost your job, if you lost all the money you had, if your insurance was canceled, if your home was gone, if disaster struck, are you convinced that you can trust God to have a place for you to live and food for you to eat and basic health care for you to receive? Can you trust Him to provide no matter what? Or do you say, oh, I totally trust God. I just need a backup. You know, just in case it all happens on a day when God is exceptionally busy. And I need to have the insurance. I need to have the money. I need to have the backup. And so perhaps it is our smaller faith in God that makes money seem more trustworthy. So what do we do with what Jesus here has said? Well, I think the easiest answer is, Jesus, could we just split the difference? So God can be number one on weekends and money, during the week. Or can we split the difference in terms of God on the outside, but trusting money on the inside, but nobody can see what I really feel on the inside? Or to trust God first, but, have reserves, a backup, have some diversification here instead of putting everything just on God. Now, none of this is to in any way say or even hint that the Bible teaches that money is bad. In fact, to the contrary, the Bible is very positive about money in its rightful place. It's just that we have that biblical perspective. For example, the Bible says that we should look at the ant as an example, because the ant accumulates food in the summertime in anticipation of the wintertime. So should we plan ahead and save up? Apparently, that's what the Bible teaches. And that as Christians, we are to be generous to the poor. As followers of Jesus, we are to provide for our family members. The Bible is clear in teaching that everything belongs to God, and we are managers of that which He has entrusted to us. If we have that perspective, that causes not pride, but a sense of responsibility. The Bible teaches that money is to be used for good and not for evil. And on, the Bible's teachings are positive concerning the rightful place of money. But the rightful place is not as an equal competitor with God. A couple of recent examples have impressed me. Recently, I sent a letter to Wooddalers that included mention of financial challenges. And this past week, I received an email from a couple missionaries from Wooddale Church saying that they were sending in $2,000. And honestly, one of my first reactions was, there's somebody that has said that God is number one. Money's not the most important thing in their lives, and their money reflects what they see as their commitment to God. Or recently I read an article that was in the Associated Press that told about a group of West Coast friends who decided to go on a shopping sabbatical. And what they decided was that they would only make essential purchases for a 12-month period. They defined essential as food, essential toiletries, underwear, and items related to health and safety for 1 year. They said that at the beginning of the year, they went through retail withdrawal. But as it turned out, it was a delightful experience. They concluded that they appreciated what they had far more as a result of this experiment. And amazingly, at the end of the year, they renewed their covenant, their experiment, to do it for a second year. Jesus was clear. You can only have one boss, only one master. And the competition in his mind was between God and money. And I think that's a hard choice. It's not a hard choice because I don't want God to be first in my life. It's a hard choice because I don't trust my own motives. I don't trust my own judgment. It's just so easy to say Jesus Christ is the Lord of my life and then make decisions about money and possessions which do not reflect that. So Jesus was right, but I find it hard. What do? Well, think about it. Think about what Jesus said and make a choice. Make a choice on which is the top God in life. And I'm hoping that we're all choosing that God is more important than money. And so we should pray and tell that to God. And then ask Him a challenging question. God, how would you like me to show this to you? What would you like me to do to tangibly express this? And then some kind of action that does it. Maybe it's like the missionaries with $2,000. Maybe it's like those that went on a shopping sabbatical. Probably it's neither one of those. It's just that we ask God for some tangible way to demonstrate that He is most important to us. Now, I want to read these words of Jesus one more time, but honestly, I'm really wondering, what do you think about this saying of Jesus? And maybe you're feeling a little anxious, a little uncomfortable about all this. Maybe you're thinking, I got to get out of here and go shopping. This is, if I could get over to the mall, it would relieve some tension here. Hey, none of this is intended to make us feel bad. In fact, it's intended to make God and us feel good, that it is the hard way, but it is Jesus' way. It's the right way, the best way. So hear it one more time. Matthew 6:24. In fact, let us say it together. No one can serve two masters. Either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. May you choose God.